I heard was the comprehensive plan. The ASK program is still on, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant.
And I'm ready. We're all here.
That,
We're all here at 6:04.
we're all here, and
Sure,
Mr.
that was
Twigg
gonna
said
keep us
that
here
they're
till
ready to go in the room, so. Okay, we're ready.
You ready, Ron? Yes, sir.
We're on the record.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lincoln City City Council meeting for Monday, July 10th, 2017 at 6:04 p.m. If you wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please sign up at the sheet near the entrance door to the council chambers. You'll be called to speak during the public comment section. Comments or testimony on agenda items listed under public hearing, public comment will be taken at that time. Roll call, please.
All right. Dick Anderson.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Deanna Hinton. Here. Judy Casper. Here. Susan Walke. Here. Kip Ward.
Here.
And Mayor Don Williams.
Here. Would you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Okay. We've had a request to make a change, so who's going to make that motion?
I move to move agenda item I, public hearings, to after presentations before G, ordinances, so that the people who are here for the public hearings do not need to wait through all our discussion about the ordinances.
Could you restate that one more time?
Move I in front of G.
Anyone want to second that?
I'll second.
Motion is second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So we're going to go to consent agenda, meetings of the minute for June 26, 2017.
I move to approve the minutes for the city council meeting on June 26, 17.
I second.
Motion is second. Discussion? Hearing none. All
I did submit a few to the city recorder. Nothing stuck.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. All right, we're going to go to comments from citizens present on agenda, non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to bring to the council's attention any item not listed on the agenda for public hearing or public comment. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per citizen, and the city recorder will use the light system. Speakers may not yield their times to others, and as a general rule, this is not a time for exchange of questions. At the conclusion of this agenda item, a councilor may discuss or raise questions regarding an item presented by a citizen. The mayor has the authority to reduce the time allowed for comment in accordance with the number of persons present and signed up to speak. Let's see, that's I-8 and F2, so we're going to hold off on that. So I don't have anyone signed up to speak right now. Anyone who didn't sign up, like, come forward?
Mr. Mayor, we do have one from our VCB director.
All right, thank you.
I'm Ed Drystott, the director of the Lincoln City Visitor and Convention Bureau. I just wanted City Council to know that Cody Chaw, our videographer, applied for an award for the 7 Miles of Smiles video he produced that we showed you later, and we are the recipients of a bronze national Telly Award.
Oh, bravo.
And if you don't mind me approaching the table,
Please.
I need to appreciate the heft of this thing.
Tell us when you get back to the mic about this group. Isn't that
Holy cow. You can do that. That is beautiful. Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work cut, you can always put it on as a hood ornament.
And who are the Telly Awards? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, the Tellys, it's an award for video production. They go back to about 1979, and it's a national award aimed at local and regional advertising. That was the original purpose. So, you know, the folks who do outstanding work, not on a national basis where you have the monster budgets, but the guys who are doing really good work for, you know, local products or regional products. That's what it's all about. But it's a national award, and it's national recognition for what we're doing here in Lincoln City.
Thank Cody and for not only applying for that, but for the fine work he did. We're all very
Thank you.
proud of it, and him, and you.
Yeah. Thank you. I just knew enough to stand back and let him do what he does.
So, quick question, though, is that the city's award now? Or is it
Actually,
Cody's?
it's Cody's award.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will that be available for anyone to see for a little while, or would he be willing to
The
share
award?
it?
Yeah, we can put
I
it.
just don't know if there's a way to do that, if we have a display.
Figure out something.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
should. Okay.
Can you put it on the website?
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
we can-
something.
Picture of it?
He's done such
do
great
that.
work. And I'd like to
No,
see if
Cody's
we
a
can-
treasure. He really is. And, you know, you look at the video work that he's done for us, and it's amazing. And A, he's very talented, and B, he's local. So we have the luxury of Cody looking out his window going, yeah, good day to shoot. And we don't have that luxury with somebody coming down from Portland or Salem, so.
All right, well, thank you for sharing that. Congratulations. Anyone else? Seeing no one. All right, we're going to jump to I. Is that correct? You got that right? Public hearing, public comments? Is that right? Okay. To accept-
No.
No.
No, presentations. We've got
Oh.
one presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we jumped ahead on it.
Ask program.
Oh, it's after G, okay, got it. No, yes. All right, the ASK program. John Fiedler, Monica Kirk. All right, it's hard to keep track of these things. And John, if I could have you maybe slide Ed's nameplate away. Sure. People don't get confused at home.
That's right.
The mics adjust, and feel free to get them up tight and close, and just give us your names and get started.
My name is John Fiedler.
And I'm Monica Kirk, and John has a handout for each of you. We can give it to you now or wait until after our presentation.
That's fine.
I'll pass them out now.
Could you give one to Kate for the record?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
The handout is English on one side and in Spanish on the flip. So in the next few minutes, what I'm going to do is answer 3 questions about the ASK program. And ASK means, it's an abbreviation for Ask A, Asking, S saves K Kids. So Asking Saves Kids. One of the questions, our first question is, what is the National Ask Campaign? And then I'm going to talk about why is there a National Ask Campaign, and then how you can become involved, should you so choose, in the National Ask Campaign. We'll start with one, the first question, what? And I guess it's, what would you do if you could ask a simple question that has the potential to keep kids, my kids, your kids, everyone's kids, safer? Would you feel comfortable asking, for instance, before our kids visit another home, whether there are pets or the type of food that your child is allergic to? Or if there's internet access, would you feel comfortable asking what the kind of the home guidelines are and safeguards that are in place to ensure that the kids use the internet properly? And Is there adult supervision? Not just an older sibling, but it is an adult around. So would you hesitate, unless you already knew the answer, to ask any of those questions? Yes, no?
Well, normally, this is not a time for us to
excuse me.
discuss these things, so you just go ahead and get
Okay.
rhetorical, and we'll just stare
Okay.
back at you and
right.
go right ahead.
Okay. Well, how about adding another question, a fourth question, to those three questions? And that question is there an unlocked gun in your house? Because that question, like the previous three questions, has the potential to change a child's life. For more than a decade, the National Ask campaign, Asking Saves Kids, has partnered with over 400 grassroots organizations to urge parents, grandparents, foster parents, anyone who takes care of children, to ask that one simple preventative question: is there an unlocked gun in the house, as a way to save a child from death or injury? The Ask campaign empowers us as parents and teachers so that we can make a difference by asking and encouraging others to do the same, by being brave enough to ask and modeling for other people. Is there an unlocked gun in the house? So that's really the answer to the first question: what is the Ask campaign? The second question is, why is there a need for the Ask campaign? And really there are two reasons. One, kids have easy access to guns in homes. Nationally, according to the CDC, 1 in 3 homes with children have guns, many unlocked and loaded. In Oregon, according to the Oregon Health Authority, 40% of the households, our households, have firearms, and almost 60,000 kids live in a household with loaded but unlocked firearms. The second reason why there is an Ask campaign is that easy access to unlocked guns can lead to tragic consequences. Nationally, the latest statistics, 2015, are that 9 children and teens under the age of 17 are shot dead daily in unintentional gun accidents. We're not talking about homicides. We're talking about unintentional gun accidents from unlocked guns. In Oregon, every 3 days, a gun caused either a homicide or suicide or the unintentional death of a child under the age of 17. Alarmingly, as an aside, in Oregon, when you compare suicide versus homicide, suicides are 3 times more common than homicides among children. So if we assume that or let's assume that the statistics that I've just cited are exaggerated, or that they are out-and-out fake news, or that the National Ask campaign, which is a collaboration that's supported and funded by the pediatrics, by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the James Brady campaign to prevent gun violence prevention. You may remember Jim Brady was President Ronald Reagan's press officer who was shot while on duty. He and his wife spent their entire life until her death last year working on initiatives to reduce gun violence. And the Ask campaign was one of their first initiatives. So if we assume that the National Ask campaign is really all about, it's a partisan attempt to fearmonger or a shameless tug at our emotions, assuming that's true, which it isn't, well, isn't it still a reasonable, wouldn't it still be a reasonable nudge to encourage people to ask in the sense of taking preventative action for children's health and safety? The Ask campaign co-sponsors include the National PTA, the American Public Health Association, the Office of Head Start, and the Pediatric Nurse Association, Pediatric Nurse Practitioners Association. And they all agree that, one, hiding guns is not enough. And by the way, a car's glove compartment is not a gun safe. Two, just talking to kids isn't enough. And three, if kids find guns, they're likely to play with them. And four, if a depressed teen knows where there is an unlocked, loaded gun, an impulsive decision could end a life. I hope you feel that I've answered the first two questions as promised, namely, what is the Ask campaign? Why is there an Ask campaign? Now I'll answer how you can get involved. Really, just ask as individuals and encourage others to ask, is there an unlocked gun in your house, before allowing a child that you're taking care of to play in that house. According to a 2011 national survey conducted by the Pew Foundation, people don't mind being asked. 93% of parents, including parents who choose to own guns, would be comfortable being asked if there was an unlocked gun in their home. According to the Ask campaign, already 19 million parents, it's really only about 12% of the parents in our country, but 19 million parents have already begun asking that life-saving question, is there an unlocked gun in your house? So my ask of you is to take a look at the Asking Saves Kids website, and it is, the website address is under More Information in the center page of the brochure. If you lose the brochure, if you Google Ask and Guns, you'll get Asking. If you don't, you'll get a lot of other things. And then also, so that's my first ask. And my second ask is, in the meantime, would you silently take a pledge to ask, is there an unlocked gun in your house, before your child or grandchild or foster child plays at another home? I appreciate your commitment and your attention. Thank you.
I also want to thank you for listening to our presentation. I first heard about this program about 6 weeks ago when I was asked by someone in Newport that I know to come before you and present. And I thought before I actually talked with you, I should probably try this myself. So on this past Saturday, my daughter was going over to someone else's house. And this is a family that I know well. I've known them for several years. And so I asked the mother, I said, do you have a gun in the house? And she said yes. And I said, is it locked up? And she said no. And I said, is it loaded? And she said, I don't know, but I'll check. And I felt some initial awkwardness in asking the question, even of someone that I knew pretty well. But I really feel like the family relationship between our two families is probably stronger for having broached the subject. However, I want to let you know and let anybody watching on TV know that at least where I was coming from, there is some initial hesitation. I came from a family that had guns. We all knew where they were. We knew that my father would kill us if we played with them. But I also went to Bi-Mart recently in the past 6 weeks and priced gun cabinets. $99 to about $600 is what I discovered there. So for some families, a unlocked gun cabinet would be out of reach. but the cheaper versions of gun cabinets are within the reach of some people. So I think just getting the message out and encouraging parents to add this question to the list of questions that they routinely ask other parents is a good thing and may help avert tragedy. Thank you.
Thanks. Great message. Quick question for Ron, and maybe Lieutenant Palmer could ask. Do we still offer the free locks, the cables? I think
I'm
we
going
do.
to ask. I'm going to ask Cody to.
Okay, so they could just come down to the police department and, yeah, so those are still available at our police department.
What are those?
Little cable locks. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, now, F3, do we need to schedule a separate date for that? It's been asked to be pulled.
No, it's being rescheduled already.
I don't have to do anything?
No, sir.
Okay, we're not going to have that. All right, now we're moving to I, correct? I'm going to go ahead and go to H because we have resolutions none. So we're going to go to I. Public hearings, public comment. Public hearing, public comment to accept public comment on zoning ordinance amendments to allow indoor theaters as permitted in the general commercial zone, planning file ZOA 2017. That's it here, right? It is now 6:25 p.m. The public hearing for file ZOA 201702 is now open. This matter was continued from June 26th. The public hearing concerns a city-initiated proposal to amend Title 17 zoning in Chapter 17.32 general commercial to add indoor theaters as a permitted use, currently listed as conditional use in that zone. The council packet includes a draft final ordinance and findings. Following the public hearing and deliberations, council may decide tonight to adopt the ordinance as presented or amended. The planning commit, do I have to go through that again, the whole spiel? Okay. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter in June and forwarded the recommendation as outlined in staff's council recommendation. City Council's role in this legislative process is to consider any written or oral testimony, as well as the Planning Commission's recommendation and information from staff and make a final decision as to ordinance amendments. Council may adopt the Planning Commission recommendation or may take other action, including taking no action. The council must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare a conflict of interest in this matter? Hearing none. The substantive criteria that apply to this hearing include the statewide planning goals, the city's comprehensive plan, and the applicable provisions of the city's zoning ordinance. Comments and testimony should be directed to these criteria or to other criteria that you believe apply to the subject of this hearing. Before staff presents a report, I'd like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining these procedures is at the entrance to council chambers. The staff will present a report and respond to any questions. After that, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If council members have questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly in the microphone and begin by stating your name only. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Will the staff present its report?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. This is a proposal to change the current standard for indoor theaters in the general commercial zone from a conditional use to a permitted use. The principal difference is that as a conditional use, there are some standards that would apply, and those are that the proposal is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, that the site is adequate for what's being proposed, that the streets are adequate, provide an adequate level of service, and that there be a minimal adverse impact on the neighborhood. In both cases, whether it was a permitted use or conditional use, it would be subject to site plan review, which covers a lot of those things, whether the site is adequate, in other words, whether it fits on the site, and also whether the streets are adequate, because there would be, in many cases, there would have to be a traffic impact study. The only one that wouldn't be present is the standard of minimal adverse impact on the surrounding properties. I think the major issue with the theater is adequacy of parking. It's indoor, so most of the impacts from the theater are going to be inside, with the exception of traffic at, just before the shows or just after shows and that kind of thing. The Planning Commission held a hearing on this and recommended unanimously that you do adopt the change so that indoor theaters would be a permitted use rather than a conditional use. The impact on staff would be that it would be easier on us, just so you know, as far as city resources, because we wouldn't have to do the public hearing for conditional use. There still, again, would be a lot of the same things on site plan review, though. So that concludes the staff report.
Any questions of staff? I guess I have. Go ahead, please.
Does that have effect on both of our theaters, or both of? I'm not quite understanding there.
Actually, I think we have 4 theaters. We've got the Sixplex, Theater West, the Cultural Center, and the Bijou. They're all, well, the Bijou, or not the Bijou, the Sixplex went through the conditional use process. Theater West, I don't know if it did or not. It was long before I was here. I'm sure the Bijou didn't, because that's been there since the dawn of time. The Cultural Center probably should have gone through site plan review, but didn't. And so the effect would be that it would make it so that that error wouldn't have to be corrected.
There's no specific problems, correct?
No, not that I know of. Really, this is prospective. Generally, it's prospective, because any new theater certainly would apply to any new one. As I said, with the Cultural Center, whatever mistake was made in the past would not have to be corrected.
So my question, Richard, is do we have any safety valves, that's the wrong word, but triggers for size? Because we're going to say, okay, you can do this now without any kind of oversight, correct? No review.
Well, it would be site plan review.
Okay, no matter what?
No matter what.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
Unless they're building a little tiny theater.
Okay, just want to make sure we're not opening up big parking issues somewhere
Yeah,
else.
all that gets covered in site plan review.
Oh, okay, all right, then I'm satisfied. Anyone else? No, thank you. Now is the time for public comment and testimony, and all I have is John. We're going to have to ask staff to start pulling their name tags when they leave the table. John, if I could just have you pull Richard's tag. No, it's right there in front, just so people don't get confused at home. Thank you.
John Collier, I'm president of the board at the Lincoln City Cultural Center. We're very much in favor of this ordinance. The intent of the Cultural Center, when it was created 10 years ago in the old Lake School, was always to have an indoor theater. And as Richard pointed out, this is the 4th indoor theater. This conditional use has always sort of just been a hindrance, or one more topic to cover, to go through in order to, an administrative provision in order to, as we've done multiple contracts. So we're very much in support of having this be accepted, seeing as how the use of an indoor theater has been very much done, not only 3 times before, but well established at the center. Thank you, and thank you for bringing it forward in the agenda tonight.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, John. Anyone who did not sign up who wishes to speak on the subject? Seeing none. Any comment from representatives of public agencies? If there's no further comment, is there a motion to close the public hearing and record?
Move to close the record and hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, what is the pleasure of the council? Discussion and deliberation.
Sure, I'd move to bring forward the ordinance 2017-08.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please. What?
Just bringing it forward.
Oh, okay.
And then have the first reading.
Oh, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
If you're ready, I'll do the readings.
Read away.
This is first reading of ordinance 2017-08, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning, amending Chapter 1732, general commercial GC zone regarding indoor theaters. Ask for approval of first reading, and we'll proceed from there.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Hoagland.
Yes.
Hinton.
Yes.
Casper.
Yes.
Wolke.
Yes.
And Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2017-08, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning, amending Chapter 1732, general commercial GC zone regarding indoor theaters. Ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ward,
Yes.
Wolke,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
and Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to 9, right? Public hearing, public comment. Accept public comment on zoning ordinances amending updated land use enforcement and inspection procedures. Planning file ZOA 201706. It is now 6:36 p.m. The public hearing for file ZOA 201706 is now open. This matter was continued from June 26th. The public hearing concerns a city-initiated proposal to amend Title 17 zoning in sections 17.84.020 and 17.84.050, updating land use enforcement and inspection procedures. The council packet includes a draft ordinance and findings. Following the public hearing and deliberations, council may decide tonight to adopt the ordinance as presented or amended. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter in June and forwarded a recommendation as outlined in staff's council communication. The City Council's role in this legislative process is to consider any written or oral testimony, as well as the Planning Commission's recommendation and information from staff, and make the final decision as to ordinance amendments. Council may adopt the Planning Commission recommendation or may take other action, including taking no action. Council must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare a conflict of interest in this matter? Hearing none. The substantive criteria that apply, well, I do. No, I'm just wondering if I do or not. Yeah, because I could be, no, because it's for everyone. Yeah, okay, never mind. All right, the substantive criteria that apply to this hearing include the statewide planning goals, the city's comprehensive plan, and the applicable provisions of the city's zoning ordinance. Comments and testimony should be directed to these criteria or to other criteria that you believe apply to the subject of this hearing. Before the staff presents a report, I'd like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining these procedures is at the entrance of the council chambers. The staff will present a report and respond to any questions. After that, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If council members have questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly in the microphone and begin by stating your name only. If you also have written testimony to submit in the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Will staff please present its report?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. This is an amendment to the Title 17, the zoning ordinances enforcement provisions. The principal purpose is to make it consistent with the enforcement process we have in Chapter 1.16 for general enforcement matters. What it does is it simplifies and makes very explicit who can give written notice of violations to offenders. Another thing it does is prohibits the municipal court from acting on zoning violations until any administrative remedies have been exhausted. So they have to go through the appeal process, like if it's a decision of the planning director. Before the court can act, it has to go through appeal to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the City Council, and even up to LUBA where that's appropriate. And Also, it makes explicit the requirement that if someone is required to keep records and the city asks to see it, if they don't let us see it voluntarily, then it would require city staff to get an administrative warrant from the municipal court before demanding those records.
Okay. Any questions or staff?
On the second page of the staff report, it mentions...
The city council staff report?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Plan Commission recommended the council adopt the proposed ordinance with an amendment, but
That's a
there was
mistake.
no
No
amendment.
amendment. Sorry.
Anyone else? Okay, I had a question, and correct me if I'm wrong in my reading. I didn't see a way that we dictate how we'll communicate with people when we're requesting records. It just says if we ask for the record and you don't provide it, but it doesn't say how we will ask. How will we communicate with someone that we want their records?
Normally, it would be by a letter saying, like, we want to see your VRD guest register. And
Is first-class mail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, when we send something like, we send it by first-class mail and registered, or certified, I mean.
Okay.
So, and if they don't respond or decline, then we would have the option of seeking a warrant.
That's my concern, is being so heavily into second homes here. Now, we seem to have a pretty good track record of communication with people.
Yeah.
But for the person who maybe doesn't get that letter, is out of town, is away, do we have a mechanism to protect them and not find them automatically?
Your Honor,
Yes.
what typically happens is the enforcement officer would write an affidavit saying, I made the following to the judge. I made the following attempts to contact and obtain consent. And if he says, I sent a letter, judge might say, well, you're going to have to try harder. So I think it's in our interest that to make an effort to get actual, whatever means possible to actually get contact so we can get consent. If we don't get consent, then we represent we don't have consent in the affidavit, and then you can get a warrant.
Right, I didn't see any of those steps written anywhere. It just says, we ask, you don't, we go, and I'm a little concerned that we don't have something that says, again, because of the unique nature of our town, that so many people aren't here year-round, that did they have the opportunity to respond?
Well, I mean, consent can be, hi, I'm here to inspect your VRD. While I'm here, I'm wondering if you can show me your records. And they say no, then, okay, that's a pretty clear personal contact. And that's what the officer would write in his affidavit. So we don't, if you're actually having personal contact with the person, I don't know, having a requirement in the code that says it has to be certified mail, return receipt requested wouldn't make sense. So.
Right, but again, I'm trying not to beat a dead horse here, but because I own one, if we're going to use your example of the enforcement officer coming to the door, well, if I'm not there, but my guests are, who's going to be communicated to?
Well, again, it's the owner that has to consent from someone who's not.
Right, and then, but again, let's say I've rented this out for a 2-week period. I've got certain things that I can and can't do with my tenants. I can't say, you need to let me in and have these records available to me. They have certain rights within that. As far as, if we're talking guest registries, and I'm just devil's advocate here. I just want to make sure that we're giving people opportunity to respond and comply.
Well, that's really the whole purpose of going for a warrant, is to make clear that there's been a bona fide effort to get the things. And it's the judge's job to balance the privacy rights versus the enforcement rights.
Yeah, I just don't see the word reasonable attempts were made. It just says, we ask. If you refuse, there seems to be just a step missing in there for me. Councilor Anderson, am I
Yeah, I think,
off here?
I hear what you're saying, but the point's trying to be made that the judge acts as that deterrent. If in fact, your concern being the city doesn't take very conscientious or reasonable steps, the judge isn't going to allow it. So it'll stop right there, and the city will have to come back and ask you again in more reasonable, fashion.
And a judge is free to make that determination,
Oh,
even
you
without
bet.
that language?
Yes.
Yeah, not just free to, that's his job.
Yeah, that's the other reason he's there.
Okay. I've never been down that road, and I've never seen something that just said without a reasonable effort, or, or just something that says, here's what our obligation is as the city, besides asking. So, it's not enough to stop me from voting for it, but it is a concern.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. And now's the time for public comment and testimony. I have nobody signed up. If anyone who did not sign up wishes to speak on this matter, please come forward. I see none. Is there any comment from representatives of public agencies? I see none. If there's no further comment, is there a motion to close the public hearing on the record?
So moved?
Second.
Did you get that, Kate?
Was that Susan?
I said it. Somebody else did too.
There's an echo.
Okay. Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Mayor, I move that we bring ordinance 2017-12 up for first reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none. Yeah, Kate? Roll
Voice
call.
vote on that one again.
What?
This would just be the voice
Okay, all in
vote.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Your Honor, Council, this is first reading of ordinance number 2017-12, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning, amending Chapter 1784, remedies, Section 1784-020, and Section 1784-050 concerning notices of violation and inspections. Ask for approval of first reading.
So moved?
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
and Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mayor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2017-12, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title 17, zoning, amending Chapter 1784, remedies, Section 1784-020 and 1784-050 concerning notices of violation and inspection. Ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
So moved?
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
and Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so now we're back up to G. Is that right? Okay. Ordinance 2017-05. Do I need to read all that? Sorry, do I need to read all that?
No, this is
Thank you.
no public hearing.
Thank you. Good, I don't want to read it. It's a lot. Okay, yeah, thanks. So what do I need to do?
Well, I need to do, I guess, the staff report and first reading, if you guys want to go there. I gave you a council communication. This is, again, ordinance 2017-05, which is the appointive bodies ordinance. And this ordinance has a number of aspects. The first aspect is to take the 2015 interview appointment process and put it into code language. And so the process that you went through to interview and do background checks for people that go on appointed bodies is in here with some updates and corrections. The other thing that's in here is there's an attempt to put in standard language for things and then delete the redundant language that appears 7 other times in the code. So, for example, most of the appointed bodies say that they could adopt their own rules of procedure. So in one place, under the uniform rules, it says appointed bodies have the authority to adopt their own rules of procedure, like the Planning Commission has Planning Commission rules. And then it's deleted from every other section for each appointed body. So that's just an example of some of the simplification and uniformity that's presented. There are some things that are not uniform. And while I could have went through and said each body must have the same membership requirements, for example, you must be a resident of the city of Lincoln City, or live within the urban growth boundary, or live within the Taft School District, or, you know, be a member of an arts organization within 30 miles or whatever. The fact is, over the years, there have been tweaks to those membership requirements that are unique to each one of those entities. And so I did not attempt to make those uniform. Similarly, I did not go through and attempt to make the powers and duties of each board the same, because they have different powers and duties. But in all other respects, I attempted to take away the redundant provisions. So really, you just have the membership qualifications and the powers and duties that are different between the bodies. All other provisions are mostly the same. There's a little bit of a difference with the Planning Commission because they're a creature of statute as well as the Budget Committee. So I left some of those provisions alone. There is a mistake in that I should have stricken all of 218030. And when we get, if in fact you proceed tonight, I'll read 218030. I had allowed the the VRD Appeals Board to be the Planning Commission, and then I left some language in there that would allow others to be appointed, and I should have stricken it. So, in addition to that, in the council communication, I tried to address a problem before it became a problem. I added some language about, this is in the uniform procedure section, that if an appointed body has a hearing to conduct, and I use the Building Code Board of Appeals as the example, the Building Board of Appeals. If they have a hearing and they, let's say there are attorneys involved, and it seems like the Building Appeals Board is basically people that have construction expertise, an engineer or a contractor or an electrician or a plumber, and they may hear appeals concerning the building code or a dangerous building order. But sometimes if attorneys get involved and things get complicated, they may feel a little bit over their head. So I authorized that body, and as well as all appointed bodies that conduct those kind of hearings, to basically contract with a hearings officer to conduct the hearing and give a recommended order to the board. That's subject to approval of the contract officer, the city manager, because, of course, hearing bodies don't have any contracted authority. But if they feel the need, and with the approval of the contracting officer, they could give the task of conducting the hearing to a professional who would conduct the hearing, write recommended order, and give it to them for review and approval. That helps. It's a way to deal with highly litigious issues and things involving attorneys, and I've used that successfully in other jurisdictions. The other thing that I did in order to avoid a problem would be using the same board. Currently, we don't have anybody on the Building Board of Appeals. So if we were to get an appeal, and we almost had a dangerous building appeal a couple years ago, we'd have to scramble to find people to be on that board. And of course, we have this appointment process and interview and background check and all that stuff. And in order to have a timely appeal hearing, we might not be able to do it if we're stuck with that. So there's also provision for the contracting officer, city manager, to, in the event we don't have people on the board, to refer the matter to a hearings officer so that we can have a timely response to an appeal. Again, that's just trying to avoid a problem by giving some authority. The other, I guess, larger issue that's presented is there are some boards, for example, the Business Incubation Committee, which may not be necessary to continue with. You could, for example, lose that entire chapter. I think it's 216. I wrote it down somewhere. And probably your economic development efforts wouldn't suffer at all because you have professional staff devoted to economic development. I think it was 216. But anyway, that's the summary. If you want to discuss it, that's fine. If you want me to do the reading and then you can discuss it, I'll proceed.
Well, I guess I just have one quick question. Ron, you're comfortable with that?
I am.
All right. Motion to...
I have several issues.
Yep.
I see now I didn't look up LCMC 2.04075. There's a reference to that about council liaisons, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what that says.
That's actually a new section that's in the appointed bodies ordinance. There's a section that refers to 204.075. And if you look in this ordinance, I believe the last section, I'll give you the page number, section 13, which is on page 57 of 232 in the electronic packet, it is inserting into chapter 204, 204.075.
Okay,
and that basically talks about the council liaison's role, basically attending meetings, reporting back to the city council about what's going on in those bodies that you're responsible for, not overreaching when you're the liaison and trying to sway things one way or the other. So that's basically, that's the section that affects council behavior, whereas most of this ordinance is actually about the behavior of the appointed bodies themselves. But it's actually a separate section in this ordinance, and it is noticed in the title of the ordinance.
See now. Thank you. Section 12 has a heading, and it says to read as follows, and then it appears that everything has been stricken.
Yes.
Is there anything left to Section 12?
Well, if you look before Section 12, Section 12 is striking, hold on, let me find the page.
I think it's page 36 in the packet.
No, I miss hard copies.
55 electronically.
Section 12 is striking 304 in 180, the Transient Lodging Tax Review Committee, but the section above it, Section 11, is adding as a new Section 268, Transient Lodging Tax Review Committee. So basically what I'm doing there is moving, the Transient Lodging Tax Review Committee is not in Chapter 2 where all the other committees are. Instead, it's just sitting out there in Title 3. So really what I did was move it into Chapter 2, reduce the redundant provisions, and strike the language that concerned it in Chapter 3.
So Section 12 is...
It's just striking the language, but it's being added in Section 11, but less because redundant provisions aren't being placed in.
In Section 2 point, whole bunch, 20, 14, 24, 25, and 26, there's references to the area from Depot Bay north. Lincoln County outside of Lincoln City, city limits. But it's referenced in many different ways, and I would like that to be consistent language. One time it says Lincoln County from Depot Bay North, time it says within the Lincoln County School District for Taft High School. Another time it says within the Taft High School District, and there's not a Taft High School District. Taft High School service area is a definable. I think it would be less confusing if it was consistent language, because I think it's all referring to the same.
I think you're right, and I think in terms, and that's in text that hasn't been changed, except for there I see one new reference to Taft High School District. But if you give that direction, I can go through the ordinance and make that uniform in terms of the treatment throughout the ordinance. And I could do that for the second reading. This ordinance is proposed for first reading this evening, but to be continued to the 24th for second reading. So if direction to consistently refer to the Taft School District service area would be appropriate.
Either that or the Lincoln County School District for Taft High School. I had a couple of typos in 206-100. It says provide, it should say provided.
The page number.
It's page
Line
33.
20, yeah, line 28 in the electronic packet. And on line 31, I think the same page, Planning Commission, the commission was capitalized but not planning. I have a concern about 206-075. The Code of Ethics. And it says, no elected or appointed officer shall have any financial interest, either directly or indirectly, through a relative or an associated business, in any contract to which the city is a party. Well, that does happen, and we declare conflicts. But this sounds like if there's any chance you can't serve the city.
It is more restrictive. And you could, in this section, I kind of mixed in elected and appointed officers together, whereas most of this stuff has to do with appointed officers. But when I was looking for other examples in other jurisdictions, I ended up getting language that concerned both. So we could restrict it to appointed officers, or, I mean, this is a decision for you. If you want to be more restrictive than state law allows in this regard, then you can. You don't have to be, though.
Well, I think that if we appoint someone and then the city enters into a contract where they have a financial interest, then we'd have to release them from the committee. Doesn't make sense to me. I think there should be some language in there.
You're right in the sense that it could have nothing to do with the public officer. I'm sorry. That it could have nothing to do with the public officer. It could simply be a relative. So if it's not desirable, we could strike it.
I would see striking it and then deal with it when it comes up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, then you declare a conflict and,
Just as we do.
yeah.
So strike the sentence that reads, "No elected or appointed officer shall have any financial interest directly or indirectly." That sentence.
I would like.
Okay.
Through a relative or through themselves?
Either directly or indirectly, through a relative or associated business or any contract. So basically, it wouldn't be any more, this wouldn't be the rule. It would be follow Chapter 244 of the Oregon Revised Statutes. So.
No more restrictive than state law.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, almost done. 206060, agendas and minutes. Well, it goes with the section ahead of that. 050 says that the head of a city department or staff liaison shall be secretary and responsible for keeping accurate record of proceedings. And then in 060, it says a member or staff liaison is responsible for taking minutes. That seems conflicting to me.
I think that's because there are some ad hoc committees that don't have staff. So it would be left to a member of an ad hoc committee to take the minutes. I think that's the reason why that language is in there.
So in 050 should say the department head may delegate such tasks to a staff liaison or committee member?
Well, again, if there is no staff, the department head wouldn't, because
That's true.
ad hoc committees are created by resolution, so it's possible the resolution would assign a staff member, but typically not. And in that case, I think the members would have to take responsibility for minutes.
Okay, if there is no department head, okay, that's taken care of. Also in 060, says the council liaison shall periodically be given the opportunity to report to the commission or board. That doesn't make much sense to me.
That's just basically saying the staff liaison can address the board or commission that they're serving on. So if you're a liaison to the planning commission, then at some point, the planning commission should ask to hear from council liaison reports, and you would tell the planning commission what of importance was happening at the council meeting, or same thing if you're on the arts commission or whatever.
Okay, have we ever had a council liaison to the planning commission?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just using that as an example. I think
Yeah.
the idea is that to use, the council typically goes through and appoints a liaison to boards and commissions that individuals are interested in. If you're interested in arts, you're on the arts committee. If you're interested in vacation rental appeals, and you're going to those meetings. But rather than have all of you try to follow all the committees and boards, you divvy it up, and then you report to the committees, and then you report back to the council about what's going on with your committee. Again, the liaison thing is try to make sure that you're hearing from your committees through the counselors that are the liaisons. I resist the idea of having the committees come in and do presentations because it just lengthens your business meetings. But I realize that they should come in maybe at least once a year. I put in here, because some of you suggested it, that you want to see them more often, perhaps even quarterly, but being mindful of the time you spend in this room. I didn't require it. And I kind of rely on the liaisons to keep the council apprised of what the boards and committees are doing.
Right, but what this sentence says seems to be the opposite of that. The council liaison would be expected to attend the meetings, so why would they periodically be given the opportunity to report to that body?
It's simply a means of the counselor giving information to the board or committee. If you're not interested in having counselors give information but rather observe, then we can strike that sentence.
So the liaison would only be observing, not contributing to the conversation?
Well, that's kind of why that sentence is there. If the council liaison has the opportunity, like at the end of your meetings, you go around and say, okay, anybody have anything? Does the manager have anything? Does the attorney have anything? At the end of a planning commission meeting, you ask, at the end of an arts committee meeting, you say, okay, well, does staff have anything? Does the liaison have anything?
Well, we already talked about in the liaison section, it talks about the role of the liaison is to facilitate communication between the council and the body, and to work with the chair on the agenda. I think that the involvement should be a lot more than periodically being given the opportunity to report.
And I agree, and this chapter, of course, 206, has a reference to council liaison chapter, the 204, but again, this language is in 206, because, not everybody is going to actually turn to the 204 chapter just because there was a cross-reference to it.
Right. Okay. Do we currently have 4-term limit? For planning commissions, that would be 16 years. That seems like a really long time.
Yeah, and even the limit isn't really a limit. It's just kind of like we'll give preference to someone else.
Yeah.
Usually you're fortunate if you have someone who wants to be on the planning commission for that period of time.
And even the other ones would be 12 years.
Yeah.
It just...
I realize it says limit, but it's really not much of a limit, but it is there in case you wanted to tighten it up. And again, I think you'd be fortunate to have somebody that'd be willing to serve that.
And I guess that we leave it up to the council to turn over more often than that if we have willing people. The only other thing that I had was this timing. In 030, 206, 030. It talks about attendance, and at the first meeting in January, a report would be given to the city recorder advising of the need for reappointment or appointment because of vacancy, unexcused absences. But at that same meeting, at the first meeting of the year, you're electing officers. And we often don't appoint until January at the very earliest, once in a while in December. I'm just afraid that we are asking them to elect officers before they have a full body.
And when I originally wrote this language, or borrowed it from another jurisdiction, I had attendance shall be reviewed by the appointed body at the first meeting in January, and I had some comments that, well, is that really the right time to do it? And so I said annually, and then put for example, at the first meeting in January. So I think it would, I didn't have to put the for example in there, we could strike it, but it was just an idea, not a requirement. It's just annually you need to go through that. And yeah, if you don't have everybody and you haven't appointed officers yet, maybe it's not the right time to do it in January, but that was, again, just an example.
Okay.
Very good. Anyone else? Yes.
As well. And I have them by PDF page because it seemed easier for me to keep track of. So on PDF page 23, 20615, and this is recruitment of members. And it's under the notification part of it, you know, you notice the media groups, you notice the council and city employers. I would just like to also add an email notification to the neighborhood associations, because a lot of times that's where you're going to get people to volunteer. Are you with me?
No, actually,
Okay,
the page number threw me out. 20615, you said?
206015.
Yeah, it's on page 4 of the, and it's actually page 23 of the electronic copy.
Exactly.
Okay, email or fax vacancy notices to the media group for, that is, radio stations, newspaper. There's a media group that Kathy uses to give public notice.
Right, right. I'm just asking to add an email notification to the neighborhood associations that there's a vacancy that exists.
Yeah. I got something on that too. Would you mind if I jumped in a little bit?
Okay, just one second. I want to see if we can do that.
I will tell you that this section previously had some language that said we would notify all existing boards and commissions as well as the media group. And Kathy, the city recorder, said, could you please take that out? I don't do that now, and I don't want to have to send emails to every board and commission. So keep that in mind if we're going to
No, I think that's fine, because if we do have liaisons to all the boards and committees and everything, then that's the job of the liaison to bring it up. But I'm just saying to the neighborhood associations, because that's, you can generate some interest through a different venue than the same people.
So we're going to add, is that like in the planning commission notices, registered neighborhood associations?
Right, exactly. And then my second part at the same place is the numbering system. It goes AA, and perhaps you want to change that.
I recognize that sometimes I get automatically changing.
Yeah, is that, you'll get,
Councilor
okay,
Hinton.
and then,
Councilor Hinton,
Yes.
before you move on, let me ask for a little bit of clarification. So you stated add email notification to neighborhood association, and then Mr. Apichello said to registered neighborhood association. Do you want to make that distinction?
I think so, or wherever there is a organized organization, I mean, where there's,
Actually, I believe the word is recognized, and I think
Recognized.
we have a process to recognize neighborhood associations because of there's a statute having to do with the planning function, so.
And so you would like that recognized in there?
yes, please, thank you. And Councilor Ward did something on that same page, so.
Yeah, I did on the same, or same number. That's, and my question was that there's been some question in the past or allegations that we didn't notify properly. And my question is if we list these, are we required to, what happens if we, for whatever reason, we can't hit them all? What are the ramifications of that? Because I think we had an allegation because we didn't provide notification on our website or something.
Yeah, we actually have a lawsuit about that. And what we do is we provide notice to the media group to give notice to the public. And because not everybody has a computer, the media group is the radio stations and newspapers and not just people with computers. So we don't have a requirement to put it on the website. I believe here, here we are going to say that for these, well, actually, it's in here, that we're going to put on C, post on the website. But prior to this, and this again is not This is for vacancies on appointed boards and commissions. The allegation that we weren't putting it on the website had to do with our meetings, and that had to do with, not that we didn't get it on the website, but that we didn't get it on the website fast enough. We always comply with the public meetings law requirement to give notice to the media group.
I just didn't want to get ourselves painted in a corner on that.
If you don't want to require it, then we would use the language like down at the end there where it says the city recorder may, but is not required to, place ads in a local newspaper or of record. So if there's something that's in this list that you don't want Kathy to do, or you don't feel that she has to do it, then we should put it in that list.
The key word in this sentence is shall.
Yeah.
Everything down below it means that the city staff has to do those things.
That's why I like the may, because if for some reason you can't do them all, and who knows what the reason is, then we've gone against our own policy.
Well, I would not want it to get kind of sloppy, though, and not done just because it's, not convenient, but.
One thing I'm going to ask Councilor Hinton and others is I don't want this to devolve into a work session, so get chairs, attention, let's continue the protocol here so we don't just have this big, wide-ranging discussion. No harm, no foul. Anyone else?
I have a number.
You're still going. Okay. Are you finished, Councilor Ward?
Yep.
All right.
Sorry, here we go. Some are just typos.
That's okay, that's why we
Okay.
do the things in the order we do.
All right, now, moving on to page 23. And, let me see, 24, I mean. I just have a question on BB. Again, the numbering system. The application process. And my question is why should the council receive the applications prior to the full background being completed? I just don't know why we would need it before we know that they're actually viable candidates.
What line?
Oh, sorry. It is line D.
No. The number.
Oh, sorry, 26. Sorry, I'm a little tired.
I think we're looking at page
24.
24 out of 232, and it's large paragraph B, application process, and small number D. The city recorder will scan the approved applications and forward them to the mayor and council for review. So at that point, the city recorder has conducted the threshold review of verifying the residency requirements, if any, and determining whether the applicant qualifies for the specific committee based upon any criteria that are stated for the committee. Like if you have to be a member of a certain industry or have certain experience or whatever. She's done that before it's been sent on to the council. What hasn't yet been done is the completed background check. Although earlier in the process, we have them referred for background. What you're saying is you're wondering why you're getting it before the background.
Before they're completely eligible.
Yeah, because the next
What if we-
paragraph,
yeah.
E is saying the recorder's at the same time sending it off to get the background and everything done.
I just think that we should get it after the background checks are done. So they're viable. I mean, they've been vetted.
I think part of the reason for that is the background check costs the city money, correct?
It does.
And so once we decide who we want to appoint, then the background check's done? Is that, or are all applications,
I think we're doing all of them.
I think we're doing all of them.
oh, then it might as well be done first then. Yeah.
Continue.
Okay. Page 26.
Well,
Oh, wait.
I'm just, I hear comments, I understand the comments, but I'm not sure where the rest of the council is on it. So is it something that council wants to do to not receive the applications until the background's done? Is there?
Yes, because what if they're pulled? I mean, that's what I'm worried about. Then we've received the information, the application, we've reviewed them, we're sorting them, we're thinking about scheduling interviews with them, and then we get notice that, oh, whoops, this one failed for some reason. I don't think we should even know that. That's kind of an invasion, in my opinion.
Invasion.
Well, I mean, if somebody, like if anybody was applying to be on the planning commission, let's use that one, and they go through the process and they go, this is, we've gotten the we have the application, we've reviewed it, we're ready to interview them, and then they get further vetted and maybe they have something on their history that would make them not eligible, then we shouldn't, why should we even know that? I don't want to know that. I don't think we need to know that. I think we should have vetted applications coming to us and ready to review them and sort them and schedule interviews.
Mr. Mayor, if I'm not mistaken, I think the employment process is offers are made subject to the background check. So when you raise your hand to be employed, you go through all that process and understanding there will be a background check. So to me, it's kind of a test. I mean, if I'm interviewing a person and I make sure they know there's a background check involved, now's a good time to withdraw. Are you still interested? I don't care what it is, but, they make the decision.
Well,
So I'm also kind of concerned about the cost expense. Now, it's not that we're overloaded with applicants, and I honestly don't know what a background check costs. But, I think I appreciate anybody that raises the hand, goes through the interview. I get to meet them, talk to them. Maybe this application or position they're thinking about, I don't think fits them well. I share other information with them. I'd hate to have them weed themselves out or, anything else, or us weed them out without at least the benefit of us knowing our citizens. So I'm one for making an offer subject to a background check. I don't want to know why they didn't make, what's on there. But you just move to the next applicant.
Mr. Mayor, I believe one of the concerns that has been expressed earlier was the concern over the public nature of the appointment. And so that if you make an appointment subject to the background check, then you're also announcing publicly that they did not pass the background check. That was a concern that had been discussed at an earlier time.
And one thing I do want to mention, I'm interrupting you again, is that just because someone asks for the chair's attention does not mean that I should automatically interrupt you, and I apologize. You have the floor, and I should be asking you if you'd want to yield. So I won't do that again to you. So
Thank you.
I continue.
I have a suggestion, because I have a number of things and not all of them are typos. Would we want this to be a short work session sometime rather than taking up the time of the council meeting?
Do any of the other counselors have more points to bring forward?
I think there's stuff to be discussed. So I would say we've burned our time on this one. There must be a better process to go through this than
I can agree
at our
with that.
council meeting.
I would just like,
Would you like to set up a work session on that? Councilor Hoagland?
Unless you're going to have it after 4:30, I'm not going to vote on it, so.
So
I just suggest if you're going to set this for a work session, let's continue first reading to the next meeting, and if we can get a work session in between, that'd be great.
Okay, good. Does that work for you?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Apichello, was it helpful to submit written comments to you ahead of time?
Yes, I did incorporate, as I was
Okay.
talking through, that when I got comments, I considered them. Of course, I don't make changes just because you ask. I look at them and I think about them, and if it makes sense to me, I'll do it. And if it doesn't, I'll explain to you why I didn't. I kept notes. But certainly, a lot of the things I found were I had made assumptions about how to get from point A to point Z, and I didn't fill in how we got there in between. So I kind of added more words, which I'm hesitant to do, but to try to explain. But I appreciate the comments. They were very helpful.
Okay, so then we need a motion to continue this to another date, is that correct?
The next meeting's the 24th. If you don't want the 24th, I think you're looking at August 14th, I think.
But that's just for the first reading, but we want to have a work session in between that. So is that something doable, or we already stacked up?
If you go to August 14th, it's doable. If you try to do it by the 24th, it's probably not.
You're suggesting the August meeting, the first?
You have a meeting on the 12th with the joint meeting with the county commissioners. You have a joint meeting with the Confederated Tribe of Siletz Indians on the 17th, and then you have your next city council meeting on the 24th. It'd be very difficult for us to schedule a work meeting in between that time. We do have a work meeting already scheduled between now and August 14th.
I move to postpone first reading until August 14th at 6 o'clock at this location.
Second.
Motion second, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And then, Ron, you'll create,
Yes, sir.
okay, thank you. And thank you all for your input. It was very educational. Ordinance 2017-06.
Your Honor, I have the first reading for this, but I want to apologize. I took Richard's ordinance and I put it in ordinance form, and I changed a few things, but we ended up with one of those format things that where it says 1, and then instead of saying A, it says 1-1. So what I did, and this is starting on section 4, is I had just made a few tweaks to correct the numbering, and the indent obviously was also, the formatting was in the second half of the ordinance was messed up. So it now reads section 4A, housing supply and variety. So again, A instead of 1, and then it's indented, it starts with 1, 2, 3, and then the next section, housing affordability, is B, and then it's 1 through 11 after that. Partnerships becomes C. Affordable Housing Fund becomes D. The regulations becomes E. Special needs becomes F. And vacation rentals becomes G. That all looks appropriate. There was one sentence that was just kind of hanging out there for some reason with the number 1 in front of it, and it says 4 properties outside the tsunami inundation zone, evaluate, and I just simply got rid of the 1 and moved that sentence together under B, under housing affordability, where it talks about tsunami zones, so that's under B. I just moved that language. I didn't add anything, just took out the spaces. With that correction, this is the first reading of ordinance 2017-06, an ordinance adopting the 2017 Economic Opportunities Analysis, Housing Needs Assessment, and Buildable Lands Inventory, amending the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan Housing Policies, and amending the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan Economy Policies. Ask for approval of first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's,
Opposed? Roll call. Oh, it's a roll call, excuse me, roll call.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Wolke,
Yes.
and Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2017-06, an ordinance adopting the 2017 Economic Opportunities Analysis, Housing Needs Assessment, and Buildable Lands Inventory, amending the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan Housing Policies, and amending the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan Economy Policies. Ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
So moved.
Second?
Motion second, discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
All right. Anderson?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Wolke?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
And Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yep. Ordinance 2713, or 2017-13.
Your Honor, Council, this is first reading of ordinance 2017-13, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations, Chapter 5.14, Vacation Rental Dwelling License, adding and clarifying criteria in the VRD license provisions of the code. I'm going to ask for approval of first reading. I'll give by way of explanation. This ordinance has just a few elements. It authorizes conveyance to a survivorship estate. So if you own property and you want to convey it one half to your spouse or domestic partner, you can do that, and it's not considered a conveyance that throws out your license. It alters the renewals to a quarterly schedule, so all existing VRDs and all new VRDs will be assigned to a renewal date that's not January 1. You'll have a quarterly renewal, the quarterly date will be your annual date. So not everybody has to come in January. They come in throughout the year, and you come in on the date to which you're assigned. And the fees would be prorated to get you to your date. And then also consistent with the VRD land use ordinance says, hey, if you're not actually doing business as a VRD, you're not going to get a license. So that's consistent with the revocation provision, and that has to do with the cap, not, we don't want people holding an approval. So with that, ask for approval of first reading.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Could I question regarding the ordinance before we go for approval? Page 5 of the ordinance, this has to do with the, where a cap is imposed, a new or renewed license shall not be issued if the $500 income standard has not been met in the preceding 12 months. Well, what we're talking about here, is my understanding, is a capped VRD, meaning eligible for 365 nights of rental. $500 of gross income, rental income. By my way of calculation, that's not even the 30-day, it's only 2 or 3 nights. I'm a little concerned that we would allow a capped, property to use up a cap position and then not generate, TRT. At this rate, if that's all they're going to do, they could be, accessory use, 30 days. So they, I think we ought to raise that limit at least beyond the 30-day equivalent, 30-night equivalent. Otherwise, there's a chance, people, I don't know how you do it economically, but a second home and then never use it other than 3 nights rental, and you got $500 gross rent. I don't think that's what we want, or what we had intended with, the caps.
I see what you're saying. My only concern with that is seeing into the mind of the person with the permit, and what is going on in their life at that time. Is there an extenuating circumstance that said, this year I just couldn't do it, but I don't want to give it up? Did we have a death in the family? Did we have something wrong with the property that we, I don't know. I see raising the number a little bit to make it a little more reasonable. I understand what you're saying, but.
Well, one, I want to get maximum out of those capped VRDs towards TRT money is my first objective. Then, I guess if I'm waiting in line, if the cap's full and I'm on the waiting list, I kind of hate to have someone using up my, place in line, or, I'm not able to move forward. So, I'm caught here with, my big motive is, if we did this with the understanding of some TRT money coming in to the city. I mean, that was a big objective. What about the tax income?
Your Honor, Counsel, I think rather than the income standard here, I think the objective was to make sure that they were licensed within the past 12 months. So while I think you might take a break, I think this is saying, okay, if you're going to take a break, make sure it's not for the full year because you need to have a license every year. I mean, you can't just let it go. So if you have an approval in an area where there's a cap, you're not going to get a license, a renewal of the license, if you haven't had a license in over a year.
Right. I think we understand that, but the point is, you could have it, and if you're only going to get $500 out of it, that's, for some of us, that's one night. And I understand where you're coming from. I just, again, my concern being, I just don't want to avoid this for somebody who has a legitimate reason to not do it for 1 year. Something happened that they just can't. And for them to give that economic opportunity up would be pretty devastating.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Typically, wouldn't these facilities have property management teams to do that, to rent them out?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of, like myself, there's a family ownership.
For a whole year? I mean,
Again, I can't.
So all I'm suggesting is, up over the 30 days.
Yeah, I can live with that.
I mean, that's something that gets it beyond the accessory use element, because, I hear what you're saying. I guess if we, it is a business, and we acknowledge it as a business, there ought to be a backup plan, because your sympathetic move disallows someone else to enter into the business too, though, potentially.
Yeah. One thing that I look at is if we have someone who is successful at this, who has been a good owner, has managed the property properly, I want to make sure that they have every opportunity to continue. So I would say, I don't know if I need a number from Richard Townsend that says, okay, what's our average rental? And then we multiply that by 30 and say, here's the number you've got to, the threshold you have to reach. Is that
Somewhere above.
something like that? Richard, can you shed any light, or Ron?
The formula that Councilor Anderson is a different formula. This is based on money received. To follow what Councilor Anderson is proposing, you're going to be looking at the number of days, which is going to require the staff to ask people how many days have they rented it. The difficulty with trying to use a number and equate with it is that people vary on how much they charge.
Right, so 500 is the tax amount, not the room rent.
No, that's,
No.
I think I read it as
The
room
revenue.
rent.
Okay.
It's a room rent.
Right. So that is pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very low number, but if you were, so what I'm saying is that if you were thinking of tying this to the accessory use, which is 30 days, it would be difficult for me to say that somebody whose gross room rents are 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,500 or plus, or whatever the number is, to equate that to a number of days. So I don't have a problem with the concept. It's just a different way that the staff would have to look at it as far as determining whether or not they would be able to continue as unlimited number of nights. So we would be looking at the number of days. It's not a particularly big issue, and I understand where Councilor Anderson's coming from this, and that
Do you have a recommendation?
Well, if you want to do it that way, I'd put it, if you're looking at accessory use, I would put it at 30 days, because that's what we have defined accessory use as being. If they're not renting it for more than 30 days in a year, then they would be subject to losing their unlimited rental ability.
And we would verify that how?
We would have to ask them we would ask them to verify the number of rooms that they, or the number of nights that they rented, which would be a guest register or something to that effect.
And that would be triggered by a low revenue reporting? How would you know? How would you know to ask them?
I don't know that I know the answer to that, other than it would be looking at, well, let me bring up the expert.
Again, I think that the $500, I understand the discussion, but I think the purpose here was to make sure that a new or renewal license not be issued if the VRD had not been licensed within the past 12 months. Because you can't do, if you're just sitting on the land use approval and you haven't obtained a license, you can't rent $500 or $50,000, you can't.
Right.
So the important thing isn't the number, it's that you have a valid license within the past 12 months. That's consistent with the land use abandonment provision that you guys passed. I was just trying to be consistent, but I didn't want to change the terms of your ordinance, so I just put it in here where the $500 cap is. But the $500 cap isn't really the issue. It's that you have to have the license within the past 12 months. I don't care how much business you do, you have to have a license. Under your land use ordinance that you just passed, you're deemed abandoned if you haven't had it licensed within 12 months. Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard.
That's right.
So again, the 500 isn't really the issue. And if we could take it out, we could just say if the VRD has not been licensed within the past 12 months. We take out the money aspect.
The 500 number was, it's pretty nominal, but the original purpose was to make sure that somebody was actually using their VRD approval. And $500 basically is one weekend a year.
And that's how you would know that they did.
Yeah. Right. And, it could be a higher number. If we want to do it on a number of nights, we'd probably ask that on the renewal application, how many nights did you rent for in the past year? And they would presumably tell us some number.
Councilor Anderson?
I heard the explanation, and I agree with that rationale. However, it doesn't take care of the issue I'm concerned about, and that being a capped VRD with the capability of 365 nights rental, at least generating an income for the city more than an accessory use. I mean, why else have caps, have these full-time if they're not generating for us? So I'm throwing it right back at it.
Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think the purpose of the cap was to protect the integrity of the neighborhood, not to maximize the revenue for the city. And so now we say you can have a business in residential zoning and tell them that they have to make a certain amount of money per year. Now we're telling them that they have to make a certain amount of money. You have to make a number of, whatever 30 days is times the average number of nights. So now now we have to tell them that as well?
No, and that's not what I'm saying. Let me try again if I can. When I heard the arguments for the revised, the caps and all that, those ordinances on VRDs, I heard a lot of arguments of woe is me, the city can't live without VRD TRT. I bought it. 32%, 33% of our income, almost more than taxes, come from VRDs, or from TRT. So we chose, wise as we are, and you're right, to help the neighborhood, protect the neighborhood, at least not spread, but at the same time preserve the income coming from that and allow business in the neighborhoods. So all I'm suggesting is give me my money. And don't use up a cap, so if, that's why I went with the 30 days. Accessory use, we also did that, is 30 nights. So at least rent it more than 30 nights or fall back to accessory use and allow someone else to do it. I just think we ought to have provisions in here that don't allow people just to sit on a cap, because then you're going to be here Mr. Townsend's going to be back to us, say, you've used up your cap. I'm getting a lot of calls to expand the cap. And I can tell you, as a counselor, I'm going to be asking, well, before we expand, I want to see the income from these caps and what each one is generating. And so why not put it in the provision now, as you go, rather than waiting for when you're mashing your teeth to expand the cap? And it's not telling them how much. Remember again, we had rent it for 180 days was one of the provisions. No, I needed 365 days. So I'm just holding them to it. Am I wrong?
I don't agree with you.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Would you
I'm sorry.
be more comfortable with the question of whether they had rented it for 30 days or a dollar amount?
Well, I don't have a preference. To me, it's, because as Mr. Chandler indicated, the rents vary by location and everything else, so
Right.
the dollar amount doesn't make sense. I think days
Makes sense
makes
to
more.
me if they haven't rented it for more than 30 days, then why should they be using a VRD license?
Yeah, well, or in the cap category.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's all I'm saying.
And that would be an easy question on a renewal application. Have you rented in the past year?
Yeah, I don't
For
know.
30 days? And that seems
I don't,
pretty low.
Councilor Ward's got the floor next year.
It's an interesting discussion. I understand what you say, Councilor Anderson, and I'm not sure that I don't disagree with it. But some input, for whatever it's worth, is that when you get like an OLCC license and you don't renew on time, first you have a penalty phase that you go through if you choose not to pay, and that's a very short period of time. And if you miss that deadline, then everything you want to renew later, everything starts from scratch. It's like they took all your old information and put it in a shredder. And that's the way they are, and deal with it. And so for me, that's reasonable. If someone hasn't paid and isn't licensed, then they're done unless they wish to renew it. I can also understand maybe why someone would want to hold on to a license even though they weren't using it, because it does add value, or at least perceived value, to your property. And maybe somebody wants to hold on to that and is willing to pay the taxes and not rent at all. I'm not sure on my position on that, but I could understand someone that came up and made that case. This is my house, my license, and I've kept it current. Why can't I keep it? To me, that's something that has validation. So that's it. That's my input.
And if I'm not going to mischaracterize my wife, as I usually do, because she's a realtor, I have been hearing quite a bit about, us coming up against the cap and the way it's impacting the value of homes for sale right now. And so I've got to kind of agree with Councilor Anderson on this, that if you're not going to use it, let someone else have it, because there are people who are waiting who could make good use of it. But again, I still have that little nagging voice that says, I want to make sure that we're not punishing somebody just because they had an extenuating circumstance in their life that wouldn't allow them to do what they meant to do. And I'm not sure how we would write that unless there's some judgment call that can be made by the planning director that says, hey, here's an extenuating circumstance. They plan on using it their full limit next year, but they couldn't do it this year.
Council, at this point, I've done the first reading. You haven't acted on first reading yet, but if you decide to pass first reading, you could set second reading for the 24th and direct me to come back with some alternative language on this section 7 here that reflects the discussion.
Is council okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So we'll need a motion approving first reading and setting second reading for July 27th, or sorry, 24th, with direction to provide some alternative language here.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion? Hearing none. I don't have to roll call this one, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
and Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you so much.
I have a comment, Mr. Mayor.
I can't hear you.
I have a comment, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Yes, go right ahead.
I just, on page 171, line 31, no, it isn't. Shoot. Sorry.
Is that something you just?
Here it is. There is line 31, but it's on page 170. Sorry, it's about the inspection and the schedule for the inspection. And it says every 3 years it'll be inspected. And I'm not comfortable with that. I think the houses ought to be inspected annually. A lot can happen in 3 years to houses that may or may not be. Do you see where I am?
I'll find.
Okay, it's the inspection.
You can just show me later.
It's in paragraph 6 on
Number, yeah, sorry.
bottom of page 4 of the ordinance. That's not any language that I've changed or added. That's in the existing ordinance. It's in, you can see it's in normal type.
It may be, but I don't agree with it. That's all I'm saying.
Save that for a discussion at the next reading.
Unless we want to. Okay.
Because we've already moved to have that picked up the next time. Okay, moving on then. Where am I at? 2017-14, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code. Well, you just take over.
Your Honor, this is first reading of ordinance 2017-14, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations, Chapter 504, Occupation Taxes, adding and clarifying criteria in the occupation tax provisions of the code. I did make a mistake on page 176 and 178 of the ordinance. It says 504050. It should say for the year commencing, and it's just, there's an additional, the word one is in there, it doesn't need to be. And then section 1 on, or paragraph 1 on 178, I did not mean to strike occupancy tax. It is in fact a tax and not a fee. So the language there in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, striking occupation tax and adding annual fee will be removed. This ordinance is intended to run in parallel with the last ordinance. It also is creating a quarterly renewal for occupational tax permits. And if you're going to do it for VRDs, you need to do it for OTP. So I would ask for, I did read it right, so I would ask for approval of first reading and ask that you set second reading for the July 24th meeting.
I had one more little typo. Should I say it now or later?
If you tell me what it is, I'll read it in full for at the second reading.
On page 5, gosh, where did it go? Oh, at the top of page 5 of the ordinance, which is 179 in the packet, line 2. If the city, I think it should be is multiple business entities instead of as.
Yes, it should be has.
As, yeah.
Okay. I'll correct that for the next reading.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
On page 177 of the PFD copy, line 8, maybe just a clarification. The finance director or designate may but shall not be required to send application for renewal approximately 1 month, blah, blah, blah. My question is, who is going to get these renewal notices if he may send them but not required to?
Currently, the language now has the finance department sending out annual renewals. But ultimately, that's a courtesy. It's up to the person doing business to come in and obtain the required permit. So we're simply clarifying there that you are responsible to do that. Now, we may, as customer service, provide to you this annual renewal, so, because we want people to comply. But that's the language that we worked out with finance.
I can say, having owned multiple businesses in different states, to get that renewal notice is, I would even pay for it to have it sent to me, because it's just days just go running into each other, and sometimes you forget, and then all of a sudden you're running afoul of the law when you don't want to. Again, I can't speak for the community at large, but I mean, if it's a matter of just, tagging $5 onto it for, this is the cost of getting this, it's a big benefit.
And I think that was just if you look at the language, it says city manager or designate shall send applications, and we changed it to may and said, hey, by the way, it's your responsibility, but, budget being what it is, sometimes you don't have the funds to do some of these things, so.
Yes,
We send out water bills, I think it should say shall.
I agree. Yeah,
Up to you.
it's too important.
Yeah.
I think shall.
Okay. I'll change the language and read it next time.
And again, I can't speak for everyone, but if there's a way that we have to, include a fee for that service, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for that.
Well, put it in the price. If it takes $5
That's what I'm
more,
saying.
put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it's $50, make it 55, and we've covered it.
It's a tax to begin with, so.
But it means everything to get those notices. But otherwise, it just gets shuffled in with the next mess.
So we have a
We have a
motion for
motion.
first reading and continue. Did we get
Is there a motion? I don't have a motion.
no motion?
I think we got to that
I made a
point yet. No.
suggestion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
In the previous ordinance, it seems, I think, there was like a 30-day notice, had to be paid before the taxes, and this one is 60. Is there a reason that the two aren't consistent?
Yeah, I added 60 here because I didn't want to penalize someone. This said due no earlier than 60 days, so this wasn't 30, it's still in here, it says 30 days is when it's due, but I didn't want to penalize somebody for submitting it early, so I bumped the date back on the
Okay.
earlier submittal.
Okay.
So let's see, I would make the motion to have the first reading of, do you want to give us?
Approve first.
Approve first
Approve
reading?
first reading and set second reading for July 24th with changes to be read at the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, discussion? Hearing none? Okay.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Wolke?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
And Mayor Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I will need to be leaving.
Sorry?
I need to leave.
Oh, thank you. All right. Let's see, we already said resolutions none. We did the public hearings, yeah? J, special order of business, review of funding recommendations for outside agency requests. You all have what we've, the committee met, and I guess this is the time for any input. Yes, no, Not sure what we're doing with this at this point.
If I could, my input would be to steal a line from Counselor Hinton. It sure would have been nice to have this a week ago after your meeting. To have it on my desk just now makes it a little tough to go through. So I'm trying to look at the, what were changes you made. So maybe somebody could recap what the thinking was.
Anything in
these-
particular? Just all of them, one at a time.
Well, I noticed quickly that some, you had $150,000. You had a request of 131, which would have said everybody should have gotten what they had. So, but I see some cut back. I'm trying to, without having time to go through it.
Yeah, I think number one, if I'm, and Counselor Casper, feel free to jump in if I'm not putting this correctly. Number one discussion was, is this going to benefit Lincoln City residents? So I think there was the discussion of, who was it? The Northwest Coastal Housing was basically Astoria, Seaside, and...
Ew.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
no,
All right, well,
no.
then, again, which one was it? There was one where we just said it's, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, so I'm trying to remember why.
Which one are you talking about?
Northwest Coastal Housing. Asked for 4,800, we said no, basically zero. And I don't have my notes with me, I apologize.
This was, yes, this was a request for upgrade in software, and the coastal housing has a
Well,
lot,
that's the, the Ridge and, yeah.
has a lot of profit and corporate support. And the Lincoln County had provided $5,750.
And then there was a strong support for any of the, the Children's Advocacy Center and CASA. We all agreed that we wanted to continue to support that. We had strong support for any of the places offering shelter, say My Sister's Place, Lincoln City Warming Shelter, and Shiloh, The Gathering. I don't know if there's any other that stood out beyond we doubled Family Promises requests, because we're all familiar with what they're doing.
No, that's what they asked for, 9. This column is...
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the
the year
amount given.
before.
I apologize. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong column.
Some of these also, Lincoln County had given a substantial amount of money. Like Meals on Wheels, they gave them $12,000 in addition to, what we provided for them, because we feel this is a very important service for our senior and disabled community. Some of these had very substantial support, and it was felt it was important to support them. But because they have other funding that seems consistent and growing, we kind of cut back on some of those. We focused on housing and food and basically our residents' needs.
Yeah, and I think we only had the Humane Society and the Coastal Housing were really the only big ones. Neighbors for Kids was half. And again, I'm sorry, I wish I had my notes with me, but I don't. Was there any other questions?
What's your
or-
question?
Do you want to put this off for another day? I mean, I can
Well-
gather my notes, and I don't think,
I guess so we have 150,000,
right?
and when I looked at the listings, we had a request for 131. Now, I did find that Angels Anonymous, 5,000 didn't get added in there, so that's 136.
You did get it out of there.
No, from the budget. All I had was from my budget
Oh.
list. Okay? So I'm thinking, we have a pool for $150,000, requests for $136,000. I'm rounding.
Well,
So I'm, without doing a crossover, because your grid here doesn't show me what they requested.
Well, and Shiloh didn't
Shiloh
request
didn't have
anything,
a figure.
so that was a big chunk.
So we just kind of threw them something?
No, they had all of their application process in, they had financial reports and statements. They had submitted a letter prior to our discussion of ending the Budget Committee meetings, requesting $75,000 to $100,000. And as you recall, when the presenter was here, she was very sick. She was very sick for a long time. So this request was made before we closed the budget process. And I looked at the letter and that was sent out. I didn't bring it with me, the letter for application. It does not say specifically to give the amount of funding amount. I looked at the letter. And so maybe that needs to be corrected in the future. It lists all these things we want to see for the funds, but it doesn't say, give us flat amount. People who have applied for before obviously know to do that. This Shiloh was a new applicant and probably wasn't aware that that specifically amount should have come with the application in the financial reports. So because it came before we ended our Budget Committee hearing and way prior to saying, oh, we have this amount of money, it was accepted as a fulfilled application.
Okay. So that got it up close to the, 150, then, is that what you're saying? And you knocked off
Right.
a couple of these others.
And if you'd like to know what Lincoln County gave, I can give you those figures too, who got their money. Do you want to know that?
No?
Okay.
But we did take that into account, how much outside funding they just received from the county.
Yeah, I just,
We just preferred to see this a little earlier.
pardon?
Preferred to have seen this earlier.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but that's, that's fine. That gives a general rule. I think I'd still argue the fact that there's some I'm looking at the warming shelter. I think what they asked for 50,000, and you gave them 45. It's amazing to me when someone, an organization, asks for the entire amount of our previous pool, i.e., for years it's been close to 50,000. And so here's someone that asks for 50,000. And it almost feels like they knew, that there was a good chance to, more money was going to go in there, into this pot. And it did. And so in essence, they benefited. I see the previous year, they got $500. It goes to my argument of those who played by the rules and knew that there was only $50,000 previously, had no reason to believe anything else. Put their requests in line with everybody getting some of the pot. So, if I haven't gone down here, but if I look at the warming shelter and Shiloh, there are other, there's 90,000 right there. I agree with meals, that kind of goes hand in hand. If I was trying to give a bigger chunk to those serving homeless, that's one of the things I would have gone through and taken a look at and saying, it looks like those two entities, Shiloh and warming shelter, got the 100,000, and everybody else played with the normal pot. And yet, there are others in here that handle homelessness.
Well, I'm going to put this as kindly as I can. We had a number to work with. We had requests to work with. The people who applied didn't have a number. They didn't know what the budget was going to be. So they just, of course, if you've been here before and you kind of know the game, but that number could have changed based on the Budget Committee's recommendations, right? There was no, hey, you're going to get this. They'll know when we know. And then I would say, you're welcome to be on the committee. I think you were asked if you wanted to be on it, and your input would have been greatly appreciated at that time.
Well, isn't that why we bring these things to the council for debate?
Sure, I understand.
And, so that's all.
Right, so I'm just giving you, we went through these, and the committee's priorities were these things. And again, I advocated strongly for Shiloh based on my knowledge of the creator of it and what they are putting in as an all-volunteer organization, and the levels they have gone to funding these things themselves, giving up their homes and their jobs to make this happen. And I'm very impressed by that, and I want to, what they're doing, and then the North Lincoln Ministerial Association is now starting to become involved with that with their giving funds, because they can administrate them so well. And I think this is an organization that really will benefit the city.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I think, Councilor Anderson, we have to also consider that when this group of people came, the warming shelter people and the help, all those groups, various 4 or 5 groups came together, we had sort of asked, could they all work together under one umbrella, because they were all working with the same population and toward the same goal. And they did that as to the best of their ability, and under the warming shelter. And then they went out and looked for a building to rent. So we knew they were in the prospect of doing that. We also knew that Shiloh has a history of program expansion and was willing to go out and try to look for a building. And I think our focus was, or I thought it was, to look and a way to help the homeless in this community. And we set out to do this with this delegation of funds. And if they come back successfully next year and with progress and sustaining the people who need their help, then we've been successful in meeting the needs. If not, well, then we can delegate elsewhere. But I think we need to extend out the hand and take the first step and make something happen.
So would it be fair to, based on what I see, 90,000 going to 2 entities that primarily, if not exclusively, assist the transient homeless population, that was your focus this year? We, the council, the recommendation, it's important to us. We're willing, Councilor Casper, as you're indicating, willing to pilot a couple of organizations that are targeting that audience. I think transient to me means, passing through, doesn't quite meet the criteria of, Lincoln City residents, but I can live with that as long as, that's what it appears to me, is that we've found, at least this year, that we want to target that population through this effort.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I'm going to kind of disagree with you, because I don't know how else to define homelessness except as transient, because they don't have somewhere to be. And so the goal is to move them from that status into a residence. So I don't know how else to do it except through these organizations that can provide some form of relief and stability for them to, much like Family Promise, to move them out of that transient state into, I'm losing the word I'm looking for, but, yeah.
Stability.
Stability, thank you. But if you have a recommendation that you'd like to make for juggling this?
Just trying to understand what you came up with. Not surprised at all, but quite frankly, but I think it helps to talk it through a bit to see what your thinking was.
Appreciate that.
As Mr. Hoagland says, I don't have to agree with you.
Yeah, you do. It's a new rule. Anyway, anyone else, something down here? Yes, no?
Yeah, I was just, on that, particularly on the bigger awards, are we going to have some accountability next year, some way to tell which of your darts hit the bullseye? Who we're going to have to really get behind the next year? Is there a vehicle for that?
I think that's going to be the question for the next committee. When these people apply, that's what's kind of nice about having, the two new members on this committee, is that they can transition. They will remember that, and if they choose to apply next year to be on, or to volunteer for that, they can say, okay, here's what we remember talking about, here's what we were holding them to. And yeah, and that was a huge part of our discussion, is the accountability, because we recognize this is a big give, and it's a gamble on the city's part, and we want to hold them accountable.
And I think there was mention of redoing the process, the application process. I think Councilor Wilkie mentioned it. And also to have a report, expectations, what were accomplished with these funds each year. So we do have accountability.
And I think some of our discussions as we were looking through applications were, we looked at how much was financing salaries versus actually doing some work. And that was a tipping point for some of our decisions of, no, I'm sorry, we're not here to pay a director. This is not what this is for. We want boots on the ground, whatever. We want this to help the people. And that was behind a lot of our discussion. And I think most of you know Councilor Hoagland's leaning, of course, is heavily for children, and rightly so, and appreciated. Again, and he was able to bring some insight into things like CASA and the other organizations. The work they're doing, he's very comfortable with them receiving their monies. And so,
If I may, I'd just like to say that I wanted to say thank you to the three of you. I know Councilor Hoagland isn't here, but this could be kind of heartstring pulling. It's a hard conversation to have. I'm glad that you set some parameters around how you were making a decision, and that it appears by the amounts given that there was weight given to the homeless community, and I appreciate that. That was the direction I think that the council was making, and I do remember talking about making this funding accountable, that it's just not free money, but we need to see how it benefited the organizations and the people that they're helping. We need that accountability.
I appreciate that, and I'll say thank you to former councilors Sprague and Oriakis for bringing me into that, and that I learned how to look at these and what the goals of the council and the city were, and hopefully continue that smoothly as we transition between the members. So, yeah, okay. Well, so do we need to have a vote on this, or we're just reviewing it? Help me out. This is a once-a-year thing, so I'm not sure what we do with this information.
It's available for you to approve, or to amend and approve, or to say no.
So we need a motion to approve?
I so move.
And you're spending money.
I'm sorry?
Roll call that, please.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Looking for a second?
Second.
I said second.
Okay.
The motion was to approve as presented.
As presented, right. So a motion, a second, discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Tell me who seconded that.
Counselor.
Got it.
It was a co-second.
Ekman.
Okay. All right. Walkie,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
I'm going to recuse myself.
Hoagland is absent. Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
and Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And then Ron, you'll set up a presentation time? Okay. Thank you. Well, we're rolling through here. City manager, city attorney report.
I have two things, Mr. Mayor. The first one is just a reminder that Wednesday we have our joint work meeting with the county commissioners. The agendas have been posted. I spoke with Wayne Belmont today. The very last item is other, And so if there are additional topics that you would like to discuss, that will be available. If you know them beforehand, please send them. Councilor Hinton and I discussed a little bit today about some signage on Logan Road and improvements to that area that we plan to bring up. The other item that I have...
I'm sorry, just to make sure we got for the public, it's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock here in the council chambers. Yes, sir. The other item that I have is from Councilor Hoagland. Before he left, he sent me an email with some items he wanted me to read. I don't know if you want me to do that now or to wait until the councilor section.
I don't know what it is, so...
Okay. He wrote, in light of last meeting's denial of allowing for citizens paying for parking, I am concerned for the public and now businesses charging for parking and camping. And he included a picture of a sign that said fireworks parking, $10. This sign was for the July 4th, and I took the photo. Oops. Second point he had was fireworks and pop-up tents. There's been some concerns over the cost of cleanup after the fireworks. Are the fireworks businesses local people? Are there fees associated with cleanup efforts? Are they required to participate in any kind of cleanup? The third item he had is with the police department, do the vehicles have a slogan? Do they say, quote, to protect and serve, unquote? Does the police department have a slogan or motto? Could that be if it isn't already posted on the vehicles? The fourth point, with housing and the importance to build community, can there be a preference to local builders, to those that incorporate community-minded designs or social areas? And he refers to a web page, which I can send this information to you, of a multifamily modular construction as an example. He said this was a model of a building that I find. He then writes, in the private sector's main goal is profit, and the number one goal of government is to look out for the people. Government is to keep private sector honest and to keep it from damaging society. In light of recent events in Portland, and he refers to a web page, and again, I can send it to you, and OregonLive.com that states Portland's rule requiring landlords to pay relocation costs to renters they evict or hand rent increases that force them to leave is legal. Multnomah County Court Circuit Judge Henry Brythup ruled Friday. And then Councilor Hoagland writes, could we look into something like this for our city, looking into renters' rights and what we as a city can do? There have been multiple people who have told me, and this has also happened to me too, where the rent will increase $200 or more. There have been renters who have it increase $100 or more multiple times per year. What can we do?
Thanks. I get, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you get questions like that, should that not be forwarded to all of us? So that
we just got these before he left.
Oh, okay, got it. And then I guess I had questions for when Mr. Apicello referenced receiving input concerning these things. I don't recall seeing that input until I'm hearing it tonight. And should we not all have access to that?
Yeah, I think I probably should have sent all the comments I received to all of you, so you
It would be
knew what
helpful.
the others had said.
Okay.
But I was trying to avoid having a discussion outside of the discussion.
Sure, I
so-
understand.
But I should have put it in the packet, so.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilor Hoagland wrote, I will need to leave at 8. If we do not get to the councilor's comments, can the following information be read? These were the comments he would have made had he been here
I
tonight.
understand. Appreciate it. It's meaty stuff to talk about, so, okay. Mr. Apicello?
I don't have anything, except Riley also asked me how he would bring up the issue of some kind of rent changes, protection, and I told him he would have to see if he had 3 people that agreed with him here at the end of the meeting, but obviously he didn't make the end of the meeting, so.
Mr. Mayor, don't we have a work session on housing
We do.
Wouldn't that, so that'd be the appropriate place to, have it added to the agenda on that.
Good. Anyway, so we're rolling along. Was that it, Mr. Apicella? Okay, thanks. Actions, if any, based on work session or executive session meetings? None. Additional comments from citizens present on non-agenda items? Any citizens? Seeing none. Announcements or comments by City Council? Mr. Warren?
Oh, coincidence.
Microphone.
This year's fireworks really, I think, affected the environment. And if I had a party and littered up the whole town, I think I would be held responsible for cleaning it up. The people that sell fireworks are companies, to my knowledge, are from out of town, and it's not local people that set up the Lincoln City stand. And I would just propose that we consider putting some type of tax on the fireworks and use that money on the sales and use that money to clean up the beaches, because they certainly, somebody's enjoying the profit and we're being left with a mess. So that's one thing on my little things here. And my other one is regarding confidential information. And on occasion, we do get information that is confidential, that would do harm if it's shared. And generally, we get that information in executive session. And I would like to make an ordinance to say that it's a violation not to return the confidential information to the source at the executive session. And so if anyone has some comments on either one of those, I'd be happy to hear them. Does anyone else have a feeling about confidential information, the handling of it when we get that in executive session?
I do. I think we should all be doing the same thing. I mean, we're here as a team, and I agree with you. We need to come to a consensus about how to handle information. I was in a room here and found a piece of confidential information on the table. I was shocked. So I agree we need to discuss that more thoroughly.
That it, Mr. Ward?
I think someone else has something.
I share the concern. I guess my concern is, I'm a responsible person, so I don't have any problem with me. It's you I worry about, you, the other guy. But quite honestly, when elected and we get sworn in, we swear, we take an oath, we have personal responsibilities. There are things that we get, and quite frankly, I can't absorb in the short time to read it, understand it, especially some of Mr. Apicello's memos can just go on and on and on. So I read it, but I'm at home in the, I turn off the lights so others can't.
I have my own cone of silence.
But in all seriousness, I don't mind. I don't know where to take this because either then don't hand it out. I'm thinking of a lot of those executive sessions were rushed. Not time to cover the whole agendas, and I want to know the material. So handing it back, I'm having a little trouble with it. I guess you're going to have to, trust me that I'm responsible, and if I'm not, then I have to pay a price for it. And I think that's what we're talking about is, okay, if Councilor Casper found a confidential item, maybe what we've got to do is put our names on them, or something. There's got to be a way that, I can be satisfied as well and absorb the information in my time frame and my way.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. It's just, it's too much to take in, especially on a full council day. We're just getting the information that moment we show up, expected to absorb it, understand it, process it, and make a decision. Sometimes it just can't happen. And the idea that, mistakes get made. I get it. We're not divulging launch codes to nuclear weapons here. And I understand some things can be embarrassing, and I sure understand that and don't want that to happen. But the idea that the counselor can't carry documents around to review at a later date, that's preposterous. Okay, wrong word. I'm sorry. That's like saying, I don't want you to have it, I don't want you to have it, I want everything to be in this one little box all the time, and nobody else, that someone else in the city is more responsible than we are, I just...
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
I have an idea. Isn't there some way, I think there is, some way to have the confidential information prior to the meetings in a way that we can view them online or in a place, but that you have to have a code or something to get into it? You can't print it, you can't save it. I mean, there is such a thing. So
We have used password-protected documents for executive sessions.
And they're not printable, they're not
And
savable.
there are security measures you can, you can stop them from being printed. When it's on email, however, you really can't stop them from being forwarded, and if someone shares the password, then, so.
Well, there seems to be some interest in discussing this further, so maybe we could bring that up at another time for fuller discussion. Okay. Anything else, Councilor Ward?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone else? There you go.
Okay, we'll just go down the line here. I just wanted to echo the fireworks discussion that Councilor Ward started. I think there's more to it. I would like to have a fuller discussion than just a tax or whatever is to the people who sell it in our city, but I've received a few complaints about how many there were and how they seem not to be the legal ones. So I think we need a bigger discussion. And secondly, and this is probably to the planning commissioner, but director, but could we start looking at some commercial design standards, maybe ask the planning commission to, I know they kind of got started a while ago. Is that okay with?
That was a yes from the planning director.
And one of the reasons is that we have the urban renewal process for providing funding to those who want to update their buildings, the front of whatever, and there are no standards. And so we're handing out money in a loan, but we don't have any standards to use it. So just think it's time.
Completely, 100% in agreement. Is that it? And then I guess we're just going to go down the line here.
Okay, I have three things. I understand that there was some marijuana tax revenue distributed. Have we received anything?
No, I'm not aware of it, but I'll check.
Okay. And I appreciate the ordinance posting at McDonald's about the transfer of information.
Oh, was that done?
Yeah, there is one there. I'm wondering if there can be one over on the other side.
There will be 4 that we're putting up, the one that's there, 2 in the Safeway entrances, and then 1 at Burger King.
Thank you.
Do we have a copy of that somewhere? I was not aware that this was being done.
I can take a photo and send it to you. They've been placed so that they are facing into the business where the cars are pulling out, so it's the people in the cars that are actually seeing what's written on those.
Have we talked to any of the business owners? I'm thinking the drive-throughs, if they would prefer to have another thing, maybe where people are paying or picking up their order, sitting and waiting, so they could digest that before they get to the intersection.
We did talk to the McDonald's owners, and they had suggested the location. They had worked with our staff on the location.
It's a good location.
Works for me.
It's not when I go through the drive-through, it's when I come back from Walgreens. I see it.
All good. Just want to make sure they have some input.
And I read in League of Oregon Cities Bulletin that they're putting together a development fee survey, and noticed Lincoln City was not on the list that have responded yet. Wondering if we could respond by July 14th so that we get in on that survey.
I am aware of that, and we will have it responded to.
Thanks so much.
Councilor Casper?
Let's see, we have a new solar light down on Southwest 29th. Everybody check it out. You push a little button and then the lights go around the sign. It's pretty cool, as opposed to the electric kind. There were, just want you to know, there
I'm
were
sorry,
less.
you mean at a crosswalk?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
crosswalk. It's solar. I think it's the first solar one we have here. I wanted you to know there were fewer fireworks in Nell Scott this year. My dog only hid in the closet for 2 days. And I'm going to be on the Sustainability Committee, which meets tomorrow. It'll be the first time I've been on this committee, so I'll be very excited to see what we're sustaining countywide. And I was wondering about our continued talk about the sewer. Will we be pursuing that? I mean, to me, that's vitally important, and I don't know where we're going to fit that in.
We are, and I don't know that it's going to be in a work meeting or if it will be in a council meeting. My guess right now is it's probably going to be in a council meeting because we're pushing it out too far on a work meeting to discuss it again.
So it will be sooner than later?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Councilor Anderson? Nothing? Okay. As usual, second Tuesday of the month, I have Celebrate Recovery. We'll be cooking dinner there at Faith Baptist Church. Know anyone who has issues with addictions and such and could use a good hot meal? That's 6 p.m. Every Tuesday at Faith Baptist Church. I did have one question concerning, I haven't seen any information from the city attorney or city manager about your meetings yet.
They have been in the weekly reports, although I did not include it in this weekly report.
Okay.
But they've been in the other ones.
Meeting and all.
We are.
Good.
And they've been very productive, and
Thank you. Excellent to hear.
I've been happy with them.
Okay. I don't know, I'm not going to weigh too much in on the firework thing, except to say, having been on the receiving end of taxes trying to control things, and I speak of soda tax in Washington, where I was taxed $1 a gallon on syrup, ostensibly to reduce pollution in the state. The numbers never went down. I don't know that the money was ever spent particularly on cleanup or to offset it. I just would say think it through before we start taxing people. If we're going to, that we actually apply that money to the purpose that it's intended, and whether if that goes to the state, to the rangers to clean up the beach, or if it's to fund volunteers with bags and such. It's just a discussion I think we need to have further. Anyway, with anything else, may God bless you all. May God bless Lincoln City. We are adjourned.
Mics are off.